In the last year or two, I have mentioned a few times that I think probably the best Linux desktop distribution, as far as the one with the best vision, the best plan, the one that just makes the most sense to somebody like me, has always been Elementary OS. Like, I really understand what those guys are doing. I get why they created Elementary OS and why they make some of the design choices that they make. I love the project, even though the Linux distribution, the desktop environment, the Pantheon desktop environment, it's not something I would run. It's not really designed as a Linux distribution for somebody like me. It's not a knock on the project. It's just, I'm a little bit of a different kind of Linux user, but I think this is such an important project, Elementary OS, that I often give them money, support them financially on Patreon, or I'll give them a few bucks at download when I grab the ISO, is because even though I don't use it, again, I think it's one of the most important projects out there as far as promoting desktop Linux. So today I'm going to take a look at the recently released Elementary OS 5.1 Hera. Pulled up the distribution release announcement here on distrowatch.com. Also, I've got the official release announcement from the Elementary OS website, which is elementary.io. I will link to the official release announcement in the show description for those that want to read it. It's actually a very lengthy post here by Cassidy, who is one of the co-founders of Elementary OS, and he details a lot of the changes in this release of Elementary OS. Today, though, I'm going to run through an install. I've already got it installed on my laptop behind me. That is a Lenovo ThinkPad. That's a E535. It's one of my test machines that I often distro hop on. I don't like distro hopping these days on my main production machine, but I will go ahead and install Elementary in a VM here on my host machine. That way I can record the installation process for you guys on camera, but the installation process in a VM and on physical hardware, it's exactly the same. No issues installing it on physical hardware. Detected Wi-Fi just fine. Everything just works. So I'm just going to quickly run through this install. Those of you that have installed Ubuntu or any Ubuntu derivatives are familiar with this install process. It's basically click OK 3 or 4 times and you're done. So at the start, you have language selection and you have the choice of either trying Elementary out, just the live ISO, or installing it. We'll go through the install really quick. So I'll click install, choose your keyboard layout. By default, it is chosen English US, which is correct for me. So I'm going to click continue. Wants to know, do we want to download updates while installing Elementary? And do we want to install third-party software for graphics, Wi-Fi, and multimedia? Yes, you do want those third-party video drivers, Wi-Fi drivers, and multimedia codecs. Otherwise, it's going to cause you some problems down the road. Alright, and now it's asking about what we want to do with our disk. Do we want to erase the entire disk and install Elementary, or do we want to install Elementary alongside another operating system, such as another Linux distribution, or maybe an installation of Windows? If you wanted to, you could click something else and do the manual partitioning. I'll just do the automatic partitioning, though. I'm going to choose erase disk and install Elementary. Let it have the entire virtual hard drive here. Click install now. It's warning me it's about to format the drive and write to the disk. Click continue. It's asking about time zone. It has correctly chosen the central time zone in the US for me. I'm going to click continue. It's asking for username and password. I'll call my username DT. And let me create a strong and complicated password for the DT user. And again, do I want to log in automatically? No. Since I created that strong and complicated password, I do want to be forced to use it to log in for privacy reasons. I will click continue, and the installation will proceed. This part of the installation typically takes about 5 to 10 minutes on most Linux distributions. I'll pause the video. I'll be back once the installation has completed. And the installation is completed. That just took a few minutes. At this point, what you would do if you were installing this on a physical machine, you would unplug the USB drive and reboot the machine like I did on my laptop when I installed it. In the VM, all you need to do is detach the ISO in the VM and then click restart now, and that's what I'm going to do. So I've rebooted the machine. It rebooted very quickly. And one of the things about the login manager that they are promoting heavily is the fact that those of you on multi-user systems, it shows your user's wallpaper, It also shows a picture of the user if you took a picture, maybe with a webcam. Obviously, I don't have a picture of myself here since this is a new installation. One of the other things I notice in the login screen, it lets me know my number lock is on. If I hit the caps lock key, would it show me if the caps? Yeah, it lets you know if the caps lock is on. That's very important, by the way, to know if the caps is on, because when you're typing your password, if it's case sensitive, that could cause you some problems. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. And we are presented with a welcome screen. Typically, I would just skip all of this, but I'll go through it here on camera really quickly to see what we are presented with here in the greeter. So if I click next, location services receive a prompt when an app requests the device's location. So some applications are going to request like some geolocation information. I guess this is nice to be able to turn this off if you don't want it. Night light, you could turn that on. For those of you that prefer to have a night light on your machine, this is important to help prevent eye strain, helps your sleep patterns and things by adjusting the color temperature of the screen, as day moves into night. The next screen is housekeeping. What do we want to automatically delete, such as temporary files, trashed files. Get some apps, so I could browse the App Center. We will take a look at the App Center very shortly, though. And then the last screen, ready to go. Do I want to click the Open System Settings? We will take a look at the system settings in just a second. Click Get Started, and it closes the greeter. Now, first impressions is, wow, great looking desktop, right? Beautiful wallpaper. I like the icon set. I like the dock at the bottom. I like the transparent panel at the top. Very simple menu system. When you click applications, you get this very easy to navigate menu. This is not complicated at all. If you wanted to, you could click the other button here and it changes the menu. Instead of just being a collection of all your apps, it does categorize them by category. You have accessories, graphics, internet, office, programming, sound and video, and system tools. If I go back to the screen showing pretty much all our apps, you will notice that there's not much installed by default. This is not a bloated distro by any means if talking about disk space, right? They didn't install, everything in the kitchen sink. That is mainly Elementary OS's desktop, their custom-built Pantheon desktop environment, and a few Elementary OS custom-built apps. They designed their own custom suite of apps really to create a kind of cohesive design, a cohesive vision of what desktop Linux should be. But let's take a look at some of the applications installed by default. I'm actually going to go through some of the applications that are pinned to the dock. So the first thing you would notice is that the web browser is not one of the major browsers. It's not Firefox. It's not even proprietary Chrome, although I would hate for them to include a proprietary browser. At least this is free and open source, but this is Epiphany. Epiphany, I've never been a fan of it, but I understand why they include it. Again, it's one of the apps that they are helping design and helping to really be integrated tightly into the Pantheon desktop environment. By default, there are no bookmarks in Epiphany yet. And under settings, there's not a ton of things as far as settings you can do with Epiphany, although one of the things you probably would be interested in is importing bookmarks. So if you're new to Elementary and you're used to using things like Chrome or Firefox on other operating systems, you can import your bookmarks from those browsers into Epiphany. Also pinned to the dock at the bottom, the dock, by the way, is a program called Plank. If I control and right click, I get this screen and I can click about and it will tell you that this program is Plank 0.11.4. It is stupidly simple. I love the description. The email client that is pinned to the dock is one of the custom Elementary apps. It is called, I think, Pantheon Mail. I really can't show it to you because I'm not going to take the time to actually set up an email account for desktop email. I do have desktop email. I typically use Thunderbird and or Geary for graphical desktop email clients. I also use a terminal-based email client called NeoMut sometimes. Calendar. This is Pantheon's calendar application, and I will say it is a very pretty program. Very clean design, bright, very friendly. If I did a click on the date, I don't know, maybe I need to left click or right click. Let's see if I right click on it. Can I not add any kind of task to the day? Maybe I got a double click. Okay. Took me a second to figure that out, but I will say it was pretty easy to figure out. When one click doesn't work, try the double click. Anyway, I could add a task. Okay, so I'm not going to bother adding a task now, but it looks very simple. Your typical calendar, appointment, to-do list sort of application. Let's take a look at Elementary's custom music application, which every time I open this thing and I see the very first screen, I always immediately think of iTunes. Like it's got that. Really, the whole thing has this kind of Apple sort of Mac OS kind of feel to it. I know probably the Elementary guys probably hate hearing that because it's not really a Mac clone. They do their own thing. But the music client especially has that kind of iTunes kind of look to it. I don't have any music to listen to here, and I'm not going to take the time to import any music. I would probably have to sync to my Nextcloud or something. You click the little settings cog here and go to preferences. You can select what folder it pulls music from, and you have some other options. For example, whether you want to continue playback after you close the player, or do you want to stop the music playing when you actually close the player. What this does, typically, if you have that set to where it doesn't stop playback on close, so you close the player, music is still playing, and it probably would have something in the sys tray, basically, letting you know that the player is still playing. Elementary has their own video application. I don't have any videos to play either, so we really can't show this. I will say, though, that it's strange that the video application has a dark theme where everything else thus far had a light theme, a silver theme. You know, a little different, although the photo application, when I mentioned that, the photo application has a dark theme. So this is Elementary OS Photos. I go through the settings here and check out preferences. Let's see, we can set our preference to which directory we want to pull. Let's check out the system settings. So this is your standard system settings, or control center, if you will. So you have your personal stuff. So we can choose what our default applications are. Right now, the default browser, of course, is Epiphany. The default email client is Pantheon Mail, etc. You know, all the stuff we just went through in the doc. The default file browser, do they have their own file browser? That's interesting. Let's pull up the file browser and see what they're using. I believe this is their own custom file browser because it looks nothing like any of the other GTK-based browsers I'm used to. This is not Nautilus. This isn't Nemo. One of the first things I do in a graphical file manager is I like to see the hidden files and directories because I often work in those as well. So I would turn that on. I don't really like the big icons. Can I change it to a typical kind of list layout? I go to properties. See, I have general, and then I have permissions. I don't want to change the permissions of any files. How do I get it to be a list? I think these buttons at the top, view as a grid, and then the next one is, I think, view as a list. Yes. Now I can work with that. And then I'm going to click the close button to close out of that. By the way, there is no minimize button in Elementary OS. That's one of the things they get criticized about a lot, is the fact that they removed the minimize button. But you guys have to understand the reason they did that is these days, minimize buttons are kind of an old paradigm. Nobody uses them anymore. When you think about modern operating systems, such as your mobile operating systems, you don't minimize an app, right? You close an app, it goes away, but it's not really closed. It's still running in the background so that when you pull it back up, it's still exactly where you were the last time you opened it. That's kind of the modern paradigm now, and I think that's the take that Elementary OS is going with this. Back to the system settings, I noticed that the default text editor is called Code. We did not check out a text editor. Let me go to the main menu system here and check out Code. And let's just start a new file. I kind of like the yellow background. That's kind of interesting. It's a nice contrast. I wonder if I could change that to something else. Is there some settings I could play with? Let me go to Preferences here. Interface. We got some things we can change, but the color settings, it looks like the choice is either white or this yellow color, which they called solarized light, or the solarized dark. Now the solarized dark I can work with. Yes, I like that. I'm going to close that out. I noticed it didn't ask me, did I want to save the document or discard the document? I wonder if I go back to Code and open it, Yeah, it's still there. See, it's like your mobile operating systems I mentioned before. Closing it is not really closing it. It's still there. When I pull it back up, I still have that document I was working on. I don't hate that. We also haven't taken a look at the default terminal in Elementary. Does Control-Alt-T bring up a terminal? No, it doesn't. In most Linux distributions these days, Control-Alt-T typically brings up a terminal. Let's see, Super T sometimes will bring up a terminal in some distributions. Super T did work. I am not sure if this is their own custom terminal. We do have the options of white, solarized light, and solarized dark again for colors. I'm just going to go with the solarized dark theme. So this is the Elementary OS custom built terminal. I don't think it may be based on another terminal, but it doesn't seem like any other terminal emulator I've ever used. One thing while we're here, let's do a quick uname-r and get the kernel. We are on kernel 5.0.0-37. Let's also run a quick htop if it is installed by default. It is. Htop is here. I love the fact that they included htop. So many Linux distributions don't include htop installed by default. I don't understand why. I think most people probably use it for, looking at their processes, what's running on their system. RAM usage. It's using 693 megs of the 4 gigs of RAM I gave this virtual machine. I would say that's pretty standard for most desktop environments these days. It seems like the lighter ones are typically 400 or 500 megabytes of RAM when not doing much, and the heavier ones are pushing a gig or better, so 700 megs. And I've actually got some stuff open, right? I still got the text editor open, because again, it doesn't really go away when I close it. All that stuff is still running. So we've got some stuff going on, and it's still not using that much RAM. It's not using really much CPU at all either, but we're not doing anything that should require much CPU at the moment. Now let's check out the App Center. One of the things in the release announcement is it mentioned it had support for Flatpaks. So I'm assuming that if I wanted proprietary software that normally would not be found in your standard repositories, the Elementary repositories or the Ubuntu repositories, which Elementary is built on. So if I wanted a proprietary application like Discord, would it find it? No. What else is available as a Flatpak that I know is proprietary? Is Telegram here? Telegram is here. Now Telegram, this is the official desktop version. If I click on it, will it actually tell me if this is a Flatpak or not? It doesn't mention it. I'm assuming that's probably the Flatpak. I'm pretty sure Telegram is offered as a Flatpak, although I've never installed it. Being a proprietary chat application, I have no need to try. I try to stick to free and open source software as much as possible. You guys know that, unless there's just no other alternative. And the great thing with chat programs is there's plenty of free alternatives. So while we're searching for proprietary chat applications that I typically would never install, let's see if Slack is here. Slack is not here. I know that's available as a Flatpak too. So I thought they had built-in Flatpak support, but maybe they don't have it built into the App Center. I thought maybe it would sync with FlatHub. One way to check for sure that they do have this built-in Flatpak support. Let me pull up a terminal again, Super T, to pull up the terminal. And if I do a quick where is space Flatpak, it will tell me where Flatpak, the binary to Flatpak, is installed on the system, user bin Flatpak. So Flatpaks are installed, the package Flatpak is installed. Oh, what about snaps? Where is, how about snapd? Snapd is not here, so they don't have snapd or snap support built in. That's kind of strange because it's built into Ubuntu, which they're based on. So did they rip out snap support from Elementary? So if I did a sudo snap install, I don't know, GIMP, one of my favorite programs, will it actually install it? No, it will not. Command not found. So they removed snap support. That's a strange decision. That's kind of great that you have Flatpak here, but you should probably have both Flatpak and snaps. Just throwing that out there. A little bit disappointed that they didn't have FlatHub supported in the App Center. I mean, you got Flatpaks supported, but unless you have enabled the FlatHub repo, most of the Flatpaks that are out there, you're not going to be able to install from the App Center. And the fact that you ripped out snap support from Ubuntu, which is what you're basing off of, is kind of a strange decision too. I'm not sure what the rationale behind either of those decisions. If you're going to have Flatpak and Snap on the system, when I think you should have both, you should make it as easy as possible for especially new users, which I think your distribution is geared toward the new to Linux user. Make it as easy as possible for them to get that software that they're looking for, especially the proprietary software that won't be found in the repos, where really you have to go to things like Flatpak and Snap to get a lot of the proprietary applications a lot of these new users will be searching for. Let's check out the wallpapers that are installed by default. It's always one of my favorite things is checking out, just some of the design decisions. I will say it's a very pretty desktop. By the way, when you minimize or maximize an application, I love how the transparent panel all of a sudden becomes black. I think that's a smart decision because it makes it stand out. Especially from the silvery color of the GTK theme. Now you got the black panel. It's very easy to tell the difference between the two. Let's get back to the settings. Let's go to desktop. Let's check out those wallpapers. It looks like it's still the standard wallpaper pack I've seen in past releases of Elementary. Really nice wallpapers though. Just some beautiful nature photography, which is typically what I put on my desktops anyway. You guys know that I have, a couple of hundred photographs, not my personal photographs, but photographic wallpapers I've collected over a number of years. I upload them all to my GitLab page for those of you that want to check out my wallpapers. Yeah, these are really nice. I mean, I really like that one. Very minimal, just black and white with just the red, a little bit of red. That is really classy right there. I could do something around that wallpaper. You know what, I'm just going to go back to the default for now and close this out. Anyway, that was just a very brief look at Elementary OS 5.1 Hera. I think this project, again, I love the fact that they have a vision. While I don't agree with everything they do, and I've mentioned it, that it's not a distribution for somebody like me, because I typically like to build basically my own desktop, right? I install something like Arch, or some other minimal Linux distribution, maybe a server distribution like Debian or Ubuntu server or something, and then build my own custom desktop on top of that, my own window manager. If I want to run a panel or a dock, I'll install that. I build it myself basically. But most, like 99% of computer users out there, they want something given to them, that's ready to go out of the box. And I think Elementary OS does this really better than any other operating system on the planet right now, as far as, again, a cohesive vision that just works. It's all just tightly packaged. Maybe it's not the most customizable thing out there, but this is better than any other Linux desktop distribution out there, as far as this is something we could present to new users, new to Linux users, people thinking about coming to Linux, and they would be blown away by this, absolutely blown away. I think Windows users would be greatly impressed by Elementary OS. This is so much better than the Windows 10 desktop environment. This is better than Mac OS, which Windows and Mac, those desktop paradigms are getting kind of old and stale and crusty, right? And even though Elementary OS kind of resembles Mac in some ways, in a lot of ways, it's not Mac, right? They're still pushing the envelope a little bit, right? They're trying new things, and I really appreciate the work these guys are doing. Again, it's one of the reasons why I like to give these guys a few bucks when I can, even though I don't personally run Elementary OS. I think it is a fantastic project, and I hope you guys, if you're looking for a good Linux distribution to try out, check out Elementary, and if you like it and you end up running it, again, support the project, donate a few bucks to these guys. They deserve it. Now, before I go, this show was made possible by Ansem, Chris, Daniel, David, DJ Stallman, Donnie, Dylan, George, Haplo, Corbinian, Lambda, Liam, Mitchell, Natek, Rob, Robert, Sean, and Willie. These guys are the producers of the show. Without these guys, this episode about Elementary OS 5.1 Hera, it wouldn't have been possible. The show is also brought to you by all those other fine ladies and gentlemen, all those names you see on the screen that help support my work over on Patreon. Sincere thank you to those guys. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider doing so. You'll find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.